Am I doing this right? I already said my name's Leanne. I'm an alcoholic, recovered alcoholic. So I know we got a couple new people, but how many of you did the homework for last week? Did all of Bill's story? Wow. Do you know that for the last couple weeks that we've been asking you that question, and as many times as I've done workshops, I've never seen the majority of hands go up. So you guys are overachievers and good students. How many of you found how many of you got some clarity in Bill's story and found that maybe you could relate to Bill a little bit by doing the work this way? Right? Okay. So I'm going to do a little recap tonight of what we talked about last week, the physical condition, physical allergy, and then I'm going to kind of lead a little bit into Bill's story, and then I'm going to turn it over to Pat because he's built the Bill's Story Pro. And we want to leave a lot of time so you guys have some time to share your experience with the work and with being in Bill's story. So after we did the physical allergy and we went through the doctor's opinion, I see that my body is addicted to physical. There's something that happens when alcohol goes into my body that I don't metabolize it normally. And there was a time when I did. We'll see later in the big book when we get into There's a Solution. It's going to talk about the 3 different types of drinkers: a moderate drinker, a heavy drinker, and then the real alcoholic. And the real alcoholic is when what happens? Physical allergy happens, right? And there's a need to drink. And I actually experienced all 3 areas. I mean, I was not that person that started to drink and felt like an alcoholic from the very beginning. I felt like I was going to have a problem. I remember being 13 years old, drinking beers on the way from San Diego to Sonora, California, in the back of a pickup truck, because you could do that back then. That tells you how old I am. Because we literally rode in the back of a pickup truck, with a motorcycle in between me and one of my girlfriends. She was on the other side, and we were drinking Beck's beer all the way. And I'll never forget that feeling of feeling freedom and thinking, oh my God, I love this so much. And I remember looking in the window and telling my cousin, oh my gosh, I think I'm an alcoholic. And they thought that was so funny. But there's something to be said about that. I wasn't an alcoholic then, but I knew that something was going to happen because I love the effect produced by. And years went by, and I think there's times that I know there were times that I could drink and I can drink normally. And then I became a hard drinker, where I would drink hard. I just was a partier. And by the time that I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, it wasn't a party anymore. I didn't get here because I was partying too much anymore. I didn't get here because it was a party, and I wasn't drinking. For those of you who can relate to this, I didn't want to get drunk. Towards the end of my drinking, I wasn't out to get drunk. That wasn't my goal. I was drinking to get right. Yeah. I was drinking because I needed to feel ease and comfort. And the only way I could get that was to put a drink in me. Wow. And I thought it was because I was making the decision to do because I wanted to. How many of you have said, oh, I can quit drinking when I want, I just don't want to quit drinking? Like, that was always my favorite line. Or my husband would go, why are you drinking today? I'm like, because it's January 28th and it comes once a year. I didn't need an excuse to drink. And that was all. I didn't need a reason. My reason wasn't because I wanted to. My reason was I needed to. And it went from a want to a need. Because there's this insatiable urge that once alcohol was put inside of me, my body broke out into what the book likes to describe, and Dr. Silkworth described as a craving for more. I'm not craving a drink if it's not in me, right? Am I craving a drink after 2 days or 3 days? Yeah, probably, because alcohol's still in my body and I'm wanting to drink more. But after being separated from alcohol for a period of time, if I'm thinking about a drink, we'll get more into this when we get into the mental obsession. I'm obsessing about the drink. It's no longer a craving. The craving has left my body when I'm separated from a drink, right? That I don't set off the craving. I don't have that allergy being set off. People a lot of times like to describe alcohol like an allergy to peanuts. Like if I had an allergy, if you have an allergy to peanuts and your throat closes up, you know, and like you don't want a peanut around you, right? Or what if you ate peanuts? Let's say the physical allergy to peanuts acted like if you ate peanuts and suddenly you couldn't remember what happened 30 minutes after you ate peanuts until the next morning when you woke up. Like, wouldn't you fucking freak out? I would freak out. Like, I'd be like, there's something happened when I ate peanuts, you know? I'm not eating peanuts anymore, you know? I wouldn't want a peanut within 10 miles of me if it made me forget what I did. Yeah. But for drinking did. I was a blackout drinker. You know, people want to hear the stories, the things that I did when I was drinking, and especially towards the end, I can't even tell you because I don't remember. I was a chronic blackout drinker, you know, but it didn't matter because I had this craving. Like when I put alcohol into my body, I broke out to a craving for more. I was restless, irritable, and discontent with just 1 or 2 drinks in me. I was restless, irritable, and discontent separated from a drink for 1 or 2 days or more. Like that feeling of being uneasy and uncomfortable. Can you guys see some heads shaking? Can you guys relate? Yeah. After doing the work and being in the doctor's opinion and really being able to understand what that physical addiction or allergy, whatever you want to call it, the physical part of this disease, how many of you feel like you have it for sure? And how many of you are kind of questioning it still a little bit? Good. I'm glad that you and that's good, because that's why we're going to spend the next 5 more weeks or so in this first step, so we can really kind of understand what that looks like. And I've taken someone through the work before and gone through the physical and asked them about the physical, because if it ever happens in me once, I am. Because there were times that I could drink, and for some reason, like the allergy just didn't get set off. And yeah, it was weird. Like earlier in my drink, like it just didn't get set off, and I would rest on the time. I go, I don't have a problem, because remember that time I only had 3 drinks, and I remembered everything, and I was responsible, and I went home at 10 o'clock. So I'm not an alcoholic, you know, and I would live on that thing that happened 3 months ago. Although every day after that was a shit show, you know, it was a shit show after that. But yet, 3 months ago, I did it, you know, right? Justifying, denial, in the delusion that maybe I don't have a problem, you know. And sometimes with, you know, earlier, it's like alcoholism has stages, kind of like cancer. If somebody told you you had stage 1 cancer, you'd do something about it. When we're in that stage 1 of alcoholism, where maybe the physical allergy happens, maybe, you know, I don't know, in 10 days, it might happen to us like 2 or 3 times, you know, but yet we're still in denial that it's that we have it, because there's still some good times that we're banking on. Does that all make sense to you? Right? Sometimes it just takes us, you know, before it's like major catastrophes have to happen in our lives. You know, and everybody can measure their catastrophe or their bottom or whatever it is. Everybody's bottom is different. Some of us are high bottom drunks. Some of us are low bottom drunks. I don't know. High bottom drunk, you know, low bottom drunks, or, you know, a lot of us and some of us, you know, can experience what it was like to be homeless, what it was like to be in jail and lose our kids, and, you know, things that the result of alcoholism had taken effect and nobody wanted to be around us anymore. And maybe high bottom drunks were, I don't know, you're standing by your pool in Rancho Santa Fe, you dropped your champagne glass, thought, oh my God, this is it, I can't do it. You know, everybody's bottom's different, you know, everybody's measure, it's measured differently. You know what I'm saying? So this is the only disease where we can diagnose ourselves. Nobody else gets to diagnose you. That's why we spend so much time in this first step, and really trying to understand whether we are or whether we aren't. You know, really trying to understand whether I'm the real alcoholic and a real addict, or maybe I'm a hard user, right? But a real alcoholic, or maybe I'm a real addict but not an alcoholic. Regardless, right? Regardless, just because I'm one or the other doesn't mean that I can do the other just because I'm not addicted to it. Does that make sense? Right? Well, I don't have a problem with pot, because I can smoke pot, because I don't have a problem with pot. I'm an alcoholic, right? I said that about meth. I'm like, I don't have a problem with alcohol, you know, because it's meth that was my problem. You know, meth is everybody's problem. Right? I was talking to somebody the other day, and the things and the psychosis that I went through, and, you know, pulling the the vents off my house and taken my jacuzzi apart because I thought that took my jacuzzi apart because I thought there were cameras in it. Like, so, and we have a flight path over my house, and I thought that, you know, that the Navy was after my quartergram, you know. So crazy things that would go, you know, that was my problem. My problem was meth. My problem wasn't alcohol. I could still drink. And now I didn't have anything to keep me up anymore. And now I could really see that physical addiction, even though I didn't understand what it is and what it was and why I could not control the amount that I drank, is because of that insatiable urge and addiction and allergy that was being set off internally inside my body. That when I drank, I couldn't control the amount that I drank. I lost all power over alcohol. I lost any choice of choosing how much I could drink after once the drink was in me. I could choose many other things, but I could not choose I could not make the choice. I would, before I would drink, I'd say, I'm only drinking 5 drinks tonight, and I'm gonna make sure that I'm home by 10. Like that, and then I lost all control over what I did after I started drinking. Because after I started drinking, it was being like possessed by alcohol, right? Can you guys relate to that with maybe alcohol? How about with drugs, right? There's, you know, we'll find our truth whether we're the real addict, we're the real alcoholic, or the real addict. Because you, like I said, you may be an alcoholic and not an addict. You may be an addict but not an alcoholic, right? There was where's Michelle? She's not here. Michelle used to say Michelle was a heroin addict, and she'd say, when I drink, I break out in syringes. Like one would lead me to the other. Like I could never do meth without drinking, but I could drink without meth. See what I'm saying? Right? So you find your truth and you discover your truth. And what is your truth to be? The only requirement for membership and to do this is just a desire to quit. But you need to know whether you're a real deal or not. Because if you're the real deal, we want you helping other people with the real deal. That's cool. You know, if you are a real alcoholic, we want you to work with another. If you're not a real alcoholic, please don't try to help another alcoholic. Seriously, because just not drinking no matter what may work for you. Those slogans, that may work for you. That doesn't register for the real alcoholic. I don't know how to just not drink no matter what when I drink no matter what. That's more in the mental obsession. And what happens is they put that alcohol in my body, and then we set off the physical allergy, and that sets the whole ball rolling again. Yeah. So we understand that, right? We understand I have to have the physical allergy in order to be a real alcoholic. I have to have the physical allergy to whatever substance I'm doing to be the real drug addict. If I don't have the physical allergy, then I'm not an alcoholic. If alcohol is what I think my problem is, and if I don't have the physical allergy to drugs, then I'm not a real drug addict. I'm a hard user or a hard drinker. Does that all make sense? I think there are a lot of people in the rooms of AA who've never actually qualified themselves to really understand what that physical allergy is and understand whether they have it or not. And I think we have a lot of hard drinkers in the room. Because have you heard them? They got 27 years and they just don't drink no matter what, and they just go to meetings, and meetings keep them sober. Shit, like that, I tried that and it doesn't work for me. I need something so much more. I need something that has depth and weight. And that's what frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices, like Dr. Silkworth said. I've got to have something with depth and weight. Yeah. It's got to have depth and weight. All right. Anybody? So how many of you are still like a little unsure whether the physical allergy is like, if you're unsure, then just keep doing this work and you don't have to go out and test it again if you don't want. I know the big book used to, Marty Mann, actually there's a suggestion in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous that actually says, you know, if you're unsure, go out and have 2 drinks. 2 drinks. Why do you think they say 2 drinks? Yeah, because the 2 drinks, because sometimes it takes enough alcohol for it to set that physical condition, that physical allergy off, right? So if you take 2 drinks and you can be completely content after 2 drinks for 30 days in a row, you're probably not an alcoholic. That's all I got to say. Do you lose power, choice, and control over the amount that you drink, what you do when you drink, after you put alcohol into your body? And if you do, then you probably are. And only you can determine that, right? Take it to meditation. Take it to meditation. See, for me, I'm talking about the insanity. That's for another day. That's for the second step. I was going to go off. All right. So that takes us into any questions on the physical allergy? Any questions? None? Okay, everybody's really clear on that. I have to have it in order to be the real deal. So that launches us into Bill's story, and which is the next chapter. Finally, now we're in actual real human numbered pages that makes sense. I don't have to figure out what Roman numeral anything is anymore. And now as you do your transcribing from the Big Book Awakening workbook into your Big Book, it all will make sense. Especially, only if you're using the skinnier book. So if you're using this book, it all should make sense now. You don't need to change any pages because now the pages will correlate to the Big Book. I remember first reading Bill's story and thinking to myself, just reading this story, first of all, it's written, I like that we are able to put definitions to some of these words because it really helps me understand what they're saying instead of just reading over it. But when I first read Bill's story, I just didn't relate to it. And I noticed that I asked some of you how many of you really could relate to Bill's story, and a few hands went up. What part of your assignment was to underline things that you could relate to, how you could relate to Bill internally, how you could relate to Bill, how he thought, and some of the things that made sense to you. Some of his justifications for drinking. One of my favorite things is what he would tell his wife. He would say, some of the here we go. We had long talks. It's talking about his wife. It's on page 2. We had long talks when I would still her worrying by telling her that men of genius conceive their best projects when drunk. How many of you would try to justify to people all the time that the most majestic constructions of philosophic thought were so derived? And I was trying to be a Christian at the time, that my alcoholism was really in full swing. And I would tell my husband, he's like, I just think it's hypocritical for you to get so slammed and hammered every night. And I'm like, Jesus' first miracle was turning water into wine. The first miracle. I can so I used to so in the book when we were writing the things that we could relate to, and when I got to that one paragraph, that's what I wrote there. And then I started to find that I started to relate to Bill so much more, because when I read his story, I think to myself, I don't really have anything in common with this guy. He's in the 30s, he was a stockbroker, he played golf, he was loyal, it's I have nothing in common with him. And then as I was on the outside, right? And so I'm not looking at the internal condition, I'm looking at the external things. Mm-hmm. And so I think sometimes when we go into meetings and we listen to people's stories, a lot of times people tell us the things that happened out here. So how are we supposed to relate to the internal condition? Because when I start to listen, when I start to write in this book and I start to write how I can relate to Bill, now suddenly Bill's story becomes Leanne's story. And now not only do I have a lot in common with Bill, I have everything in common with Bill. I have everything in common with how he thinks, how he drinks, and how he feels. And that's what brings us together. It doesn't matter whether we're men, women, black, white, Christian, Buddhist, old, young. The one thing we all share is this physical addiction to alcohol and or drugs, and that we are alcoholic and we all think, drink, and feel the same. Mm-hmm. Some of the stories that come out that wouldn't make sense to the normal drinker, make perfect sense to us. In More About Alcoholism, I'll jump ahead, putting a little bit of whiskey in your milk just seemed to make, maybe on a full stomach I could drink that. That makes sense to me too. I probably would have thought about that too. Some of the things that makes no sense to the person who has no like physical, mental, or spiritual condition when it comes to alcohol and drugs. That makes sense? But now I see that everything about Bill's story, I have everything in common with. And I love Bill's story because Bill's story is my story too. So I'm going to leave it right there, and I'm going to open up for Pat, let Pat finish off, and then that way we can open it up to you guys and let you all come up and share. So thanks.
Good stuff. What's that? Pat alcoholic? Mikey's going off. Wow, there's a lot of people that did the assignment. I mean, I think almost, like I'd say probably 80%, 85% in here did the assignment. If you haven't completed the assignment, try to catch up. This last assignment was probably the toughest to do the writing in, and a lot of stuff like, doctor's opinion, Bill's story back to back. It's a lot. So do yourself the favor and try to catch up. It'll work. Okay? Can everybody you don't have to raise your hand, but make an internal commitment to yourself. You're worth it. You're worth it to find out your truth. Okay? So I'm not going to spend a ton of time on the history, but I do want everybody to be able to relate to Bill a little bit more. The progression, what Bill's trying to do in his story for 8 pages 1 through 8, is to show us all his progression of where he started out and how great alcohol was in his life. And by the time he got to page 8, there was nothing great in his life left over, and alcohol was his master, and it was killing him. And he had absolutely no ability to find a solution. There was no ability. And what I think we keep on forgetting, we're sitting in here in 2020 in January, and Bill in 1934, there are no answers. The best doctor on the planet looked at Bill and said, basically, I am the best. There is nobody better at trying to help people get recovery. And I'm telling you, you're going to die. I am out of solutions. We doctors do not have the power to do this thing, and we can't. So that's where he ends up. I need to relate. Bill growing up, he grew up in a place called East Dorset, Vermont. I've never been there. I've seen lots of pictures. But it's like little hamlets in rural area, and there's a lot of, the town is like maybe 800 when Bill's growing up. The town next door, Manchester, is like 3,000, the big city. So, I mean, it was that kind of an environment growing up. And you have to remember, Bill's elders had fought in the Civil War. Okay, just to put a little bit in perspective. So, Bill growing up, he idolized his dad. He and his dad had a ton of fun. And his dad was winsome, he was happy, he was gregarious, and people loved being around him, but he drank too much. And by age 11, Bill's dad, at Bill's mom's request, exits stage right. Bill didn't know it was going to happen, doesn't see his dad for 8 years. He's 11 years old. Pretty formative time. 11 to 19, he didn't see his dad. A lot of stuff's going on. So Bill's dad is the guy who says, "Come on, Bill, let's go." They had some money. And they would rent, back in the day, a horseless carriage. And on Sunday afternoon, they would go out and just drive around town like they're the big. They weren't the wealthiest. They could see the wealthiest, but they played like they were the wealthiest on the weekend. Okay? And Bill had a blast with his dad. Just loved him. He leaves. Bill has no clue this is happening. So his first level abandonment hits really home. Anybody experience that stuff? Okay. Bill, never a cross word. Bill's mom, on the other hand, was very stern, very disciplinarian, incredibly gifted lady herself. Was one of the first women doctors of osteopathy in the United States. Her dad put her through med school at Harvard after Bill's dad leaves. And so she can't stay in East Dorset, Vermont and provide. She leaves her kids. She goes to Boston. leaves her kids with the grandparents. The grandparents are raising Bill and his sister. And Bill, this book, it actually brings tears to your eyes. This little kid of 11 years old, and pass it on, has tons of letters that he wrote to his mom from 11 till about 14 when mom wasn't around. Hey, I hope, I'm trying to be really good. If you come back, I promise to be good. And he would go into detail about how much fun he's having, how he was doing in school. He was trying to do everything he could to win his mom back to coming home. And for whatever reason, the communication didn't come down from grandparents to him that mom's out trying to make better of herself, which she does, and be able to provide for them later on, which, by the way, she sort of does. But basically, grandmother, grandfather raised Bill. And then when he's going to school, he gets switched out from his loving grandparents, who he really idolizes, to the other set of grandparents. He goes from one set to the other set. And so he keeps getting shipped off and shipped around. And he has this inferiority thing going on because he keeps having to reintroduce himself in school. And he wasn't great at anything, but he could try hard. And so he wasn't a gifted athlete, but he tried out for the baseball team. They all laughed at him. He came back saying, I'm going to show you, I'm going to be the captain of this team. And he became a pitcher, and a decent pitcher for the baseball team. He couldn't play an instrument, but he says, I'm going to show you, and he becomes the violinist, the first chair violinist in his school. So Bill had this knack for overcoming obstacles early on in his life, and it would suit him and serve him well for a long time. Do you remember back in the day when your drinking or your using didn't blow you up, that you actually sort of galvanized you, made you more courageous? I lived on alcohol making me that person for 10 or 12 of my business years, where it served me very well. And that was going on with Bill. And then towards the end, Bill didn't start drinking until he was 21 years old. 21. And he had all these premonitions from his grandparents on both sides. Said, listen, your dad and your granddad, you don't want to go that route. You got a bad gene in you. Do not touch this stuff. It'll take you down. And he knew it. He gets into the military. He goes to this. I'll keep the story short in this part, but he goes to the military academy, and he almost graduates, and they ship him off, and he's in a military school. And the military school, this is right before as World War I is breaking out. And they ship him and his classmates off because he's in a military academy, and they ship him off to a place called Plattsburgh, New York. We talked a little bit about last week. Dr. Silkworth's at the same facility, the military camp, the Army camp. And Bill is, again, he's uncomfortable in social settings. Maybe ever drink because you're uncomfortable in a social setting, right? By the way, normies do the same thing. Not a big deal. Problem is, if you're an alcoholic, the social setting ends up being sort of a social disaster on routine. Am I right? It was for me. I mean, I'd start out in the party and, being the upstanding guy, and next thing you know, I'm breaking into the friend's liquor cabinet downstairs because there's not enough beer or whatever they were serving up, and I knew the hard stuff was downstairs. That was a routine deal. Pat, please don't drink tonight. And I'd be swiping unopened bottles of vodka and gin from the people's bar and going off in the upstairs master bedroom of the house of my boss's boss, and ended up with alcohol poisoning. That was routine stuff. I was just trying to fit in. Bill too. So he goes to this party, and the rich folks are throwing this big military party, rah, 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 World War I, we're going to go over there and get the bad guy. Bill was totally uncomfortable. The first time in his life he'd ever seen a butler. There's Crystal on the table. There's 4 spoons, 3 knives, or whatever it is, and 3, you know what I'm talking about. I mean, I was that guy too. I grew up really poor, and when I came to a place where there was all this place setting with all these extra stuff, I was going, what the hell do you do with this? I'm totally uncomfortable, and I'm watching the guy next to me going, okay, he's starting from the outside, okay, outside in. That's how you do it. Yeah. And I didn't know all this stuff, and I felt totally uncomfortable, and so did Bill. And this lady at the house goes, and her name was Katie Grinnell. She had lost her husband in the war, and says, hey, if you have one of these Bronx cocktails, you're really going to feel at ease. OJ, vermouth, and gin. A lot of gin. Bill tries. Oh, wow. Life makes sense. Man, I can relate to you now. You're not up there and I'm not down here. We're right here. He starts telling stories and spinning yarns, and the people loved what he was talking about. He doesn't remember much about the night. His friends take him home, back to the barracks, and they're saying, God, you were crazy. He says, I know, wasn't it great? He doesn't remember anything, but he liked the effect in the front end. He started drinking, and for Bill, he was immediately out of control from then on. So that night, now on page 1 and 2, in Bill's story, they take him over to, he ends up going over to England. In the war, he's for the Coast Artillery, and they send him over, and he doesn't know what's going to happen. I mean, there's no one in this room that can relate to World War I. But if you, and I love history, and if I read World War I history, honest to God, it made even Vietnam look like, just a Sunday afternoon kind of deal. World War I was the most vicious, vile, dehumanizing event that we've ever had in modern warfare. It was unbelievable. Mustard gas going on. There's no word to describe it. So they bring in these brand new recruits into England, and he's scared to death. And he's in England, and he goes to this Winchester Cathedral, and it talks about it at the very beginning. We landed in England. I visited Winchester Cathedral. Much moved, I wandered outside. My attention was caught by a doggerel. That's like a little trivial verse on an old tombstone. And I've got a picture. One of my buddies went over, and if I think Linton's on the Skype tonight, but he and his wife went over to England. They took a picture for me of Winchester Cathedral in the cemetery of Thomas Thetcher's gravestone, which is the story about the Hampshire Grenadier. Hampshire Grenadier, this little doggerel, is about the equivalent of a Navy SEAL back in the day. This is a badass soldier. This guy is a kick butt, the elite of the elite. And listen what that says about him. Here lies a Hampshire Grenadier who caught his death drinking cold, small beer. Not a musket shot, not mustard gas, not anything else. Cold, small beer. Oh, well, a good soldier is never forgot whether he dieth by musket or by pot. And the pot being the pot where he's holding in the drink. And Bill reads that, and he's thinking about his experiences back in the States in New York. And he's going, man, maybe I ought to back off this a tidge. But by now he's discovered the French wine as they get sent to assignment. And the only real scary thing that Bill had happen to him over in the war, he and his 6 buddies were what are called Coast Artillery, and they had these little companies with a big 16-inch cannon that was set up, and they'd be in strategic places. And his location was in the mountains of France. And the shell that was shot out of these things would travel 9 miles. The shell would fly 9 miles. So part of his job was to make sure the gunner it was trued up and it was in sight. So he rode a horse all the way over 9 miles, and he's a spotter, right? He's a spotter next to where the shells are supposed to land. And so he's, given the signal with the wireless on the ability for it to go. The first shell lands on the target. Man, he's just high-fiving himself because he's the guy that's teaching all these guys how to do it. And the next shell, unbeknownst to him, is coming over, and it's not trued up from a different gun. There's like 4 guns in this barrier, and it lands virtually within probably from here to the window. And soil and dirt and rocks are flying, and he's virtually almost killed. It's crazy. It was a virtual miracle that he didn't die. And so shortly after that, Armistice Day is declared, and he's over in France, and by now he's forgot all about his fear, and he's drinking, and he's having a grand old time. So he comes back to the States. He's a war veteran, And now he's going to try to get a job in New York. And he's finding out pretty quickly that the leadership and the war veteran thing didn't quite pan out. So what happens to him? My talent for leadership, I imagine, would place me ahead of vast empires. So he said, I'm going to go to law school. So he goes to night law school, and he can't finish at Brooklyn Law School because he's too drunk to take the final. So the drinking's starting to get routine, the drinking's starting to progress, and now it's starting to impact both his life and Lois. They've now gotten married, and he's going, wow, this is becoming a little bit of a problem. So he says, one of his first jobs, he goes to work for a company, and the company was called U.S. Fidelity and Guarantee, and what their job was to investigate fraud on Wall Street. A little ironic, wouldn't you say? Mm-hmm. And so Bill is talking to all these guys, and he's watching what a bunch of yahoos they are, and he goes, man, I can do this stuff. I could do Wall Street. I could take over Wall Street. Did anybody have illusions of grandeur? Yeah. He has an inferiority complex, and yet he is a mega ego maniac. I can relate completely. It's easy to relate. So he goes in, now he's studying law, he's studying economics, and he becomes one of the first, and very successfully so, one of the very first stock analysts on Wall Street. It was back before anybody even studied the industry. They were just taking random shots at making money, random shots at losing money, and no one really saw the logic behind studying the industry, studying the company, studying the management. And Bill was an analyst. Bill was a smart guy. And he figured, I'll figure this stuff out. So he does. And he makes a boatload of money. $180 back in the day was a bunch of money. And he and Lois got together and they bought 2 shares of then General Electric. And after stock splits, each share in 1928, guess how much it was worth? $5,000 a share. Can you imagine that? Going from $160 a share all the way up to $5,000 a share. That's the rise. And news traveled fast, and Bill was wanted by everybody to be their stock analyst guy. So he and Lois said, hey, I got an idea. Let's get on a motorcycle. Let's go up and down the eastern seaboard, and let's investigate companies, and we'll have people pay us to do it. And no one would pay him to do it. He was going, I got this great idea. How come you won't pay me to do it? And they go, we don't believe in what you're doing. So he goes with Lois on the motorcycle. Have you guys ever seen the picture with the motor in the sidecar? Right. Who do you think's driving? Lois. Lois is the driver. And so they're doing this for 8, 9, 10 months. I can't remember exactly. And they don't stop. They're going up and down the eastern seaboard, and then they ended up for a short period of time over in Cuba, of all places, looking for more deals. And he's fancy hotels and getting money and all the rest. And the reason I bring this up is that at the very end, they get into a motorcycle accident. Bill blows up his shoulder, and Lois bumps her knees, and she can't go. And so they have to come back to New York and being taken care of by Lois's parents. So by this time, one of the things that was also going on is Lois is trying to get pregnant, and she has 3 in a row atopic pregnancies, tubular pregnancies. Lost all 3, and after the 3rd, the doctor was saying you can't have. And when she was in one of her crisis moments, she said to Bill, hey, don't be gone too long. Bill goes over to the bar and says, I'm just going to have a few and I'll be back. And he doesn't. She goes into a crisis of pre-pregnancy, loses the baby, almost bleeds out. And Bill is spinning yarns at the bar. Did you ever do things that you regret, that you feel shame, and just lurk in the back of your mind like, I can't believe I did that. What the hell was I thinking? Because Bill loved Lois. He loved her. It wasn't like, do what you want, girl, I don't really care. No. He didn't intend to blow up the night and not be there to protect his wife. Anybody have those kind of regrets? Yeah. Can you relate? Yeah. And this stuff's happening more and more and more, and it's being connected more and more and more to the alcohol. And by the end, we're going to skip forward a little bit. On page 3, it says, my drinking assumed even more serious proportions, And then the stock market falls apart on page 4 in 1929. And Bill's reaction to it was, I'm going to go to the bar, I'm going to drink it up, and I'm going to plan my rebuild tonight. And anybody that's whining and anybody that's jumping out of windows, you guys are blankety blanks. You guys aren't living. You guys aren't the real deal. I'm the real deal. I'm going to be back in my accustomed way of living. And he says, I felt like Napoleon returning from Elba. No St. Helena for me. Elba, back in the day with Napoleon, they captured him. They're going to put this guy down, this evil little Napoleon. He escapes. He's back up and he reigns again for another year, 14 months. But they catch him again. The British catch him. Ain't no more escaping. They throw him off in this little Italian island in St. Helena. He ends up dying of cancer on this island, never to see the light of day again. And that was a foreshadow of what Bill was trying to say was happening to his life. You know, he had a brief reprieve where everything's all right, and he was going to make a comeback. It's going to work this time. Did you ever have some comebacks in your life? Like, this time I'm going to do better, it's going to work? I'm underlining everything in the book. And by the end, he says, like in this one part, it has been 52 in the morning. I was finished, and so were my friends. The papers reported men jumping to their death by the towers of high finance. That disgusted me. I would not jump. I went back to the bar. Then we get up a little bit further. And I'm going to spare you some of the deal, but on page 6, the reality of the drink. Here's my experience. All my psychology, or whatever you could, all my psychoanalysis myself, like I'm going to make this thing work, I'm going to do this. All my emotional get up and go, attaboy, come on, make it work. You know, pick yourself up by your bootstraps, Pat. Come on, fly straight. You don't want to lose your kids. You don't want to lose your wife. You don't want to lose a second wife. You don't want to lose your job. You don't want to lose a second job. Fly straight. Fly straight. You're going to do it. By the very end, page 6, he's saying now, because he thinks I have what it takes, he's starting to realize that he can't drink at all. So he says, I'm going to apply the same thing I did to be successful in every other area of my life. When I was the down and outer and no one liked me as a school kid, I tried hard, and I ended up being the captain. When I came into Wall Street, everybody doubted me, and then they're all following everything I say to the tune of paper millions. I'm going to do the same thing with alcohol. Did you ever think you had what it takes to overcome your deal? I could beat this thing. Now I know what it takes. I can't drink because every time I drink, I break out in the allergy. Leanne, you did a great job on explaining the allergy. That's the real deal. If you have the allergy, there is not enough mental constitution in the universe to stop you from drinking. It's the truth. Bill thought, though, self-will, man, self-knowledge. And then he breaks out in the drink again. Remorse, horror, and hopelessness of the next morning, page 6, are unforgettable. Can you relate to that statement? You've been trying, and it blows you up again. My brain raced uncontrollably, and there was a terrible sense of impending calamity. I hardly dared cross the street lest I collapse and be run over by the early morning truck. For it's scarcely daylight. All night place supplied with a dozen glasses of ale. My writhing nerves were stilled at last. On the morning, paper told me that the market had gone to hell again. Well, so had I. The market would recover. Now, 2 pages before, when the market went to hell, what did he say? I'm going to go make it happen. I'm going to go make a big comeback. The market would recover, but I wouldn't. This was hard thought. Should I kill myself? No, not now. Then the mental fog settled down. Gin would fix that. 2 bottles, oblivion. Can you relate? Mm-hmm. I give. You own me. Alcohol, you're my master. Take me out of here. Drugs, take me out of here. Doesn't matter what it is. He suffered for 2 more years before he started seeing Silkworth. And so when he ends up seeing Silkworth from 1932, 33, and 34, he has 3 bouts with Silkworth before he gets to the solution. And part of the thing is, we're going to jump ahead here. One more sort of a crazy story. He's going to play. He knows he can't stop drinking. He's drinking pineapple juice and gin mostly around the clock. But he's on one of these dry spells where he's sober for about 6-7 weeks. And he says to Lois, you know what, I'm feeling a little bit better today. I think I'm going to go over to Staten Island and play a little golf. Lois goes, the good Al-Anon that she was, yeah, Bill, go do that. That'll be great. You go play. Lois is working 16, 17 hours a day as a designer for storefront windows in retail stores. And she tells him, yeah, go ahead and spend what little cash we have, go play some golf. Right? Al-Anon, here we come. And so he goes over there, and the bus gets into an accident, and the guy sitting next to him in the bus, they said, hey, let's go get a sandwich. We're waiting for the next bus to pick us up. So they go in, and Bill, during the course of the lunch, the guy says, hey, you want to have a drink with me? He says, oh, no, I can't drink. I'm an alcoholic. I cannot even take one drink. If I do, all bets are off. I cannot drink. And here's what happens to me. And he goes into all the detail. And the guy goes, oh, my gosh, you're right, man. I wouldn't drink ever again if I was you either. That's terrible. And so Bill says, you're right. It is terrible. And so the bus comes, and they get to the next stage, right? And he's going to go out and shoot guns for a while. Bill's going to play golf. But there's a tavern right across where the second bus stops. The guy says to Bill, hey, come on in. Let's have one. We got to have some lunch. It's taking so long. Let's go and get some lunch, and then you go play golf. I'll go shoot. It'll be all great. So they go in there, and it's Armistice Day, and they're celebrating the victory in World War I. And the bartender comes around and gives everybody a glass of whiskey, a little shot of whiskey. And he pops it down in front of Bill, pops it down in front of the other guy, and not even with everybody raises a glass. World War I, victory! Bill included. The guy looks at Bill and goes, oh my God, after what you just told me, you have got to be insane to pick up that drink. And he goes, yep, I am. Bill never got to the golf course, ended up on the front steps, passed out, bloodied, bruised, has no recollection. Lois doesn't even say a word. Nothing to say. Bill doesn't say a word, nothing to say. You get to that spot where you're out of excuses. Nothing to say, not even to yourself. You don't even have the cheerleader pick me up routine for yourself anymore. You know what I mean? Right? He goes in, gets a detox. He goes in a couple times with Silkworth, and Silkworth dries him out. We had the story about Silkworth last week. Third time, Lois is with Bill because he stays sober for 2-3 months, and then he goes out and drinks. They go to the country, they go back, they do geographics. And we've done this geographic, he wasn't drinking. And when he came back to the city, he would be drinking. So Lois is trying to get him out of the city all the time. And it just doesn't work. He can't stay sober. So they go back for the third time. He goes on a drunken bender. And Silkworth tells Bill with Lois, you're gonna die. Page 8. Trembling, he says, you're going to die of the DTs because we don't know how to control them. This is in 1934. They can't control the DTs. They didn't know that they could throw a little barbiturate at you and calm you down a little bit, make the ride a little bit softer on the landing. People are routinely dying on DTs. Real common in Towns Hospital, the leading hospital for alcoholism. They're still dying. He said, if that doesn't kill you, you're really close to the wet brain, you're probably going to die or go insane. Or we'll have to lock you up in the insanity ward. That's your choices. And Lois goes, oh my God, is that your real answer? That's the bottom line? So that's the bottom line. There is no hope. That's it. I'm done. There is no more. Trembling, Bill steps out of the hospital, a broken man, fear sobering up for a bit. Then came the insidious idea of the first drink. He didn't even know at the bottom of the page 8, second to last paragraph, soon to be catapulted into what I like to call the fourth dimension. Dark. A lot of people this week I was speaking to that were in the workshop, and their common was some spiritual darkness going on, some emotional darkness, some really heaviness in your hearts. And it's real common when we're in our first step, because there's a lack of hope. There's this, I have to be pushed my face right into my disease and find out what I am not. I don't have any control. What am I? I'm the real deal alcoholic, real deal addict, and I can't control this thing. It's going to kill me. And I don't have a solution. I don't have a solution to get myself out of this mess. I'm coming to the workshop trying to figure this thing out, and I'm hoping to God this thing's going to work. But I don't know if I believe it. And how in the heck is talking about for 7 weeks, first step, 3 parts of the disease, allergy of the body, mental obsession, spiritual malady. How in the heck is that going to tame the monsters that are going off in my head? And the stark raving terror that I'm feeling in my gut. How's this going to work? And you're asking the same question that every alcoholic that has recovered has gone through. So you're right where you belong. Hang in there for the ride. So Bill's told he's going to die. And he's back home. And now on page 8, and we're going to speed through this because really the next 5 pages is Bill's wrestling with a higher power. Ebby comes over his house. And I'm going to be done. It's 8:08. I'll be done. We'll have like at least 15 minutes for people coming up and telling your experience. But I want to make sure we're covered on this. Ebby is his best friend from childhood. Grew up with him. And Ebby was as bad an alcoholic as Bill. Ebby was supposed to go to prison. He was trying to shoot pigeons off his roof, and he was slipping, and people around him in this little hamlet of East Dorset are going, people are going to die. So they take him over to the judge. The judge is a friend of a couple of the guys that are with Ebby, and they say, hey, judge, give us Ebby. We'll get him, I think we get him sober. I think we got a cure. We can see this Oxford group thing that we're participating in is working. So the judge gives Ebby to the care of a couple guys, 3 guys, Shep and Roland Hazard and Shep, who's the third? I can't remember off the top of my head right now. But anyway, there's 3 of them. Ebby gets sober. And part of the cure is he has to tell the story to somebody else that's as bad off as he was. I know who's as bad off as I am. My best buddy from drinking days, Bill Wilson. I'll go over and say, Bill. So he calls up Bill and says, hey, I want to come over. Bill's going, God dang great, man. I'm dying over here in my self-pity. We could drink till the sun comes up. It'll be great. He comes over. Bill offers him the drink, and he says, no. No? What are you talking about? Ebby says, I got religion. Really what he says in commentary is, I have found the solution, and it's God. Not what Bill wanted to hear. At all. Bill was not, he was a skeptic by nature, double skeptic by nature when it came to religious ideas, and he was contempt prior to investigation. He didn't want any part of it. But he goes, well, I got enough gin, it'll last me. We're fine. You go ahead and talk. You rant and rave all you want. You just preach it at me. I've had a lot of people try to preach at me. Go ahead. And Ebby didn't preach. All he did was witness to the power of God in his life. Bill, I don't know how to tell you. I couldn't stop drinking. I followed their simple directions. And what's happening in my life, I can't explain any other way than God's doing for me what I couldn't do for myself. And Bill says, well, I can't accept your conception of God. And Ebby's frustrated beyond belief and goes, Bill, quit making this such a big deal. Find your own conception of God. And Bill goes, my own conception? And Ebby goes, he's thinking about the Oxford, how-to book. He's going, well, it's probably not in there, but yeah, your own conception will be just fine. He's making it up on the way. And Bill does. and we speed through in pages 8 through 16. He has this blinding white light experience, which is probably coming out of hallucinations in the belladonna treatment, but who cares? It's real for Bill, and thank God. Here's the miracle. William Silkworth, the doctor, sitting next to Bill, watching a lot of people have these hallucinations coming out of the belladonna treatment, didn't look at when Bill says, this is what happened. I feel like a clean wind's blowing through me. I feel like God of the universe just came into my life, and I have a release. I don't know how to explain it, but I think I have a release from this compulsion to drink. Doctor, am I going crazy? And Silkworth has a nanosecond to pull off the answer. What's the correct medical answer? Bill, you're crazier than owl shit right now, and you're coming off belladonna. Yeah, you're pretty crazy. I'll come back and see you in the morning. He doesn't do that. Bill, I don't know. Whatever you've got, you hold on to it because it's better than anything you've had. That's where Bill got the concept of the drowning man grabbing onto a thin reed. It's not going to hold up his body weight in the water, but hold on. I know it doesn't make sense. Hold on. And then Bill, for the last 4 pages, says, here are the steps that I took. And he outlines the 12 steps. Each one. And then he says the most miraculous thing, and I'm done. I'm 1 minute early. It's dear to my heart. So often in sobriety these days, you see this selfish component where people become recovered, and then they're gone. They're off to their life, the good life. They get the job, they get the wife, they get the husband, they get the whoever. Money starts coming back in, and they're off. Hey, could you help sponsor? Oh, no, man, I got too much going on. I got travel, I got this, I got that. I don't have time for sponsoring. I don't have time for service. I just don't have time. Bill got it. He understood that it is absolutely essential that he works with another alcoholic for the rest of his life. Service was not an addition to sobriety, it was an essential. When each of you in this room have recovered, which will happen as a result of doing this work, the challenge and the gift that you are given in recovery is to share this gift for the rest of your life with those who don't have it, that have no way out, that are in the cave, in the dark, and they are screaming inside their head going, there is no way out. You have the power to go into the cave with your hand and put your hand around them, your arm around them, and pull them out with you, saying, I'm just like you, man. One alcoholic, one addict, working with another alcoholic, another addict. What a gift. That's the story of Bill. Thank you.
Awesome. So come up and share your experience of how you think, drink, and feel like Bill.
Wow.
All right.
Wow.
There you go. Brave soul.
I wasn't here yesterday or last week, so I have to make up for it. I'm Erin. I'm an alcoholic. I just wanted to say this because we were talking about it earlier before the meeting started, that when I was reading Bill's story, there's like this degree of awareness that he sounds like he had in his disease. But I think he had it after he was sober and he's writing his story, because I was never that aware of my disease when I was in it. I don't know if that makes any sense. And so when I came in here, I didn't have a lot of what Bill had externally. But one of the questions from last week was, did you relate to Bill's hopelessness? And initially, my ego says no, right? Because I never drank in the mornings, and there's all these other things I didn't do that Bill did. But then it said, do you think you were like Bill, hopeless, wanted to stop but couldn't? And so I had to check myself and be like, well, no, I didn't experience anything that Bill experienced, but I didn't experience a lot of the external things he experienced, but I did want to stop and couldn't. Mm-hmm. And I'm just saying that out loud because I know when I came in here, I did not initially relate to the description of alcoholics as having a craving, but I stayed in long enough to better understand it, right? And then I didn't initially understand the mental obsession, but I stayed in long enough to eventually dry out enough to understand it. And I think that's what this program does. We have to kind of stay in long enough to start realizing how much we relate to what is actually being said. Because I don't know about you guys, but my ego was so big when I came in here that it was really hard to have that be penetrated for months. And the only way it could was for me to stay in here. So I loved these questions, allowing me to get a better idea that even if I didn't drink in the morning, you know, I had a lot in common with him. And even if I wasn't so scared, I wasn't scared because I didn't allow myself to even feel the fear because I was too busy drinking away the fear. So you don't get that level of awareness until you dry out. Mm-hmm. So I'm just glad I stayed in here long enough to figure that out.
Bill alcoholic. Bill. Shout out dope too. So this is my second time going through this work, and what I discovered was that I guess I missed the part about underlining the stuff. Mm-hmm. I don't think in my other book it's underlined, but I got a lot underlined on this one. And you know, it's the whole thing is underlined. I mean, you know, I had so much fun going over this with the step buddy, and there was one that you know, all I had to do is just change like one word in it. You know, where is it? Well, you know, it starts out on when it starts getting into Bill's solutions. You know, the last time it was on page 10 that I found out that those fears really had their music, and that was when I like really lost it because, you know, like Bill, I was, you know, super agnostic and stuff like this, and wow, you know, then it goes down. Then I had little doubt that a mighty purpose and rhythm underlay all. It gave me permission to finally believe. It just gave me permission to get it, you know, and it's because, you know, before that I was talking about how Evie came over and Bill had knew that Evie drank like him, and he was looking at a miracle of sitting across the table from him, you know. It's like, I can't tell you that I've ever met any of my childhood friends. They're all dead, but, you know, to watch, I don't know anybody ever used with, you know, none of them, I went to the NA convention recently just to hopefully find just one person that made it in out of that storm, and you know, there ain't none. But where was that? Where he's going back to the institution. All I had to do is change that word from institution to prison. You know, one more time, right back. You know, to the consequence. You know. People feared for my sanity, you know. So did I. I could eat little or nothing when drinking. I was 40 pounds underweight. I was 130 pounds when I got locked up last time. 130 pounds. That's how much I weighed at 17 years old going into the Army in 1975. 130 pounds. But I was just a kid. And you know, all this stuff, man. Yeah, there had been no fight, every time the obsession came up, there was no fight, that high resolve, none of that stuff, all that stuff. And, if this is your first time, I want you guys to stick with this, because there's this thing on that one page where Pat was talking about, I was soon to be catapulted into what I call the fourth dimension of existence. I was to know happiness, peace, and usefulness in a way that life that was incredibly more wonderful as time passes. And I'm telling you, 3 years ago, I stood down in Old Town, Mike was talking about it here a few weeks ago. I stood up and asked, why are you here? And I'd been coming to the meetings for 30 years, and I just didn't want to go back to prison, I just don't want to go back, And why I'm here tonight is because I want to pass this stuff on. I got joy in my heart, and I want you guys to know that it is here. It's in this book, and you will get rocketed. You hang in with this thing, and you will find you will be recreated. That's another one in here, recreated. All right.
Karen, do any of our Zoomers want to share? We're going to pass the baskets here. Keep in consideration that we need to buy food and pay rent, so whatever you could do. I'll go get the basket. Does anyone want to share? Sue. Hold on a second. Let me turn. Yeah, hold on. Let me get the volume up too.
I didn't put any makeup on. Oh shoot.
Oh, look at it. You look beautiful. Okay.
Hi, my name is Sue, and I'm pretty sure I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Sue.
That's what I wanted to share tonight. Leanne kept talking about the obsession, and there's a lot of questions that I can't relate to or answer because in 1974, I became a Christian, and the Lord took the obsession away from me. But when I was 13 years old, I drank into oblivion and I blacked out. I was babysitting a little baby, and the last I remember is I put it in a little stroller and took her outside, and I woke up the next morning. Thank God somebody found me. So I knew when I became a Christian that at 13 that I thought I was an alcoholic. So I didn't get into it heavily. I mean, when drugs and all of that was coming down, in the 70s, 60s, and 70s, I drank, did, bennies, did reds, and took, a psychedelic. So I can relate to all of that, but that was after I had all that, I became a Christian. So in 1974, I stopped drinking, and I only have one kidney, and I thought, you know what, it's better for me not to drink anyway. But I've always had this thing in my heart that I am an alcoholic. And so when you talk about the obsession, I would have to go out again and have a drink and to find out if I have that obsession. But I have felt like I've had it the whole time, but it's been so long ago, it's really hard to relate to. So my question is, with all of that said, and then I had another blackout. My ex-husband was a musician, and we were out at bars all the time, and everybody would buy us drinks, and I passed out one night. I mean, I had a blackout, and I asked my husband the next morning, "Did you bring me home?" And he, like anybody would say, "Well, who do you think did?" But that was the second blackout I had, and so I started coming to AA. It's going to be 12 years ago, and I started learning about what a blackout was and a bunch of other things that I could relate to as an alcoholic. I didn't have a low bottom. I didn't have to go through that. But as I've said before, I can attest to you don't need alcohol to have crazy thinking. And I did for many years until I started going to AA and was a white knuckler. So my question is, how would you, I know I have to decide if I'm an alcoholic, but I guess I wanted to know if you know you've had blackouts, does that make you an alcoholic?
Okay, I'll answer that. I'll answer that for you. You guys can, that's a good question though, because I thought that you had to have blackouts to be an alcoholic, and you don't. And like we learned in the first step, in the first chapter, the doctor's opinion, I have to have the physical allergy to be an alcoholic. That doesn't mean that that doesn't mean that necessarily you'll have blackouts, but you could pretty much qualify somebody just by asking them a couple questions. One, when you put alcohol into your body, can you be comfortable with just 2 drinks? If you can't and you have to drink more, then that physical craving you have the physical craving. Number 1, can you control the amount that you drink after you start drinking? Every single time. If it ever happens once, then you're not, if it ever happens once that you can't control the amount, then that's something to consider. Also, can you control what you're doing after you start to drink? Okay? Can you control not having a blackout? But blackouts don't necessarily determine, they're normal they're normal drinkers that have blackouts. That's just a product of what alcohol can do to you when you drink too much. There is a difference between drunkenness and alcoholism. So we're not talking about drunkenness, we're talking about alcoholism. And alcoholism has nothing to do with blackouts, although sometimes that is a product of alcoholism. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're alcoholic. So there's a big difference between drunkenness and alcoholism. Alcoholism is I can't control the amount I drink once I start to drink. I can't control what I do after I start to drink. And I can't control what I do, the amount that I do, and I can't control, come on you guys, help me out here. I have my losing my mind. I can't control the amount, I can't control what I do. Yeah, and can I be comfortable with just a couple drinks? Am I completely content with just a couple drinks after I start to drink? See what I'm saying? Is that do you see how that allergy takes effect? If you can't relate to that, then if you can with your own mind be completely can you control the amount that you drink once you start? Can you be completely content with maybe having a glass of water after you've had a couple glasses of wine or a couple drinks? You, right?
Power, choice, and control.
Right? Can you hear me?
Power, choice, and control.
Power, choice, and control. Have you lost the ability to choose the amount that you drink once you start drinking? Have you lost power? Have you lost control?
Can you hear me, Leanne?
I can.
I loved drinking. Now, I don't know whether that makes a difference at all, but
Well, no, it doesn't make a difference. Actually, a lot of people love to drink. There are normal drinkers that love to drink. Yeah, well, first of all, I think every single alcoholic in this room likes to drink, and there are people who like to drink that aren't alcoholic. The difference is they don't have a physical allergy once they start to drink. That's alcoholism. But you know what? If you want, my phone number's on the website. If you want to call me, we could have a longer conversation about this. I'd love to chat with you. You have my phone number? Or Karen can give you my phone number. Have Karen give you my phone number. We can chat. What part of the world are you calling? Are you from?
California.
Oh, you're from, okay. So we're the same time zone. Call me tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That
Thanks.
was great. And
Good,
so was
thanks.
Pat.
Yeah, I'd love to chat. All right. Any other questions? All right. So next week's homework, we're just doing one assignment. We're doing the first half of There's a Solution. First half of There's a Solution, Zoomers. So just the first half. So make sure that you get all your work done. Any questions? No?
Thank you.
Let's close with the third step prayer. Do you have anything, Pat?
No.
Okay, we'll close with it. Thanks, Zoomers. Love you guys. We'll chat tomorrow.
Love you too.
Much fancier. Mine's a store bought. And everybody, after we get out of the prayer, if you bring your chairs over to the